Here is the patrolman. He is generally the first man on the job after any incident. Wearing his rubber boots and carrying other protective equipment, he proceeds along the track. Hello. What's that peculiar smell? It smells like mustard gas vapor, so he decides to protect himself before proceeding. There's no need to get panicky. Quietly and efficiently he puts on his respirator, making sure that it's fitting properly. Next, the oilskin coat. Now for the number 2 anti-gas ointment to protect his hands. This should be freely applied to the hands and wrists and rubbed well in between the fingers. Finally, he buttons up the coat and proceeds carefully to examine the track. Notice the poke stick which he's carrying. He may need this in a moment. Ah, there's the damage. Typical, isn't it? A crater right under the track. He must now look carefully for signs of liquid gas. Most likely he'll find traces of it on the head of the rail. Yes, there is something. An oily-looking liquid, which must now be tested with the poke stick. If it is liquid mustard gas, the detector paper on the head of the poke stick will turn red. By the way, don't leave this paper lying about. Bury it. He must now take steps to protect approaching traffic. He collects detonators and places them on the line in the orthodox manner. But, he's omitted to place those danger gas boards. Now for his report, which must be sent as quickly as possible. In this case, the signal box is the nearest point, and so he passes his message to the signalman from a safe distance. On no account must he enter the box wearing those rubber boots, as they may now be contaminated. It is most important that a clear and concise message be given of all the damage, particularly whether any line is still intact and available for traffic, and if possible, the direction of the wind should be given. On receipt of this information at headquarters, the divisional engineer will be advised, and he will decide whether a gas train is needed to cope with the incident. If so, instructions will be issued for a train to proceed. In this incident, the gas and repair train is needed, and the necessary instructions and routing are given in accordance with the information received from the patrolman. Here we see the men joining the train, bringing with them their respirators and steel helmets. On joining the train, each man is given a number by his supervisor, and this number is placed on each article of his equipment in order that he may be recognized when fully dressed. Proceeding to the locker bearing this number, each man takes out the underclothing, rubber boots, and socks. In the center of the compartment hangs the number 2 oilskin protective clothing and the impregnated suits. And whilst the train is proceeding to the site, the men undress, put on the underclothing, impregnated suits, and finally the oilskin trousers and rubber boots. In case you're not familiar with the impregnated suit, this is the ordinary battle dress which has been specially treated, but which is only necessary when high concentrations of gas are to be dealt with. In putting on oilskin clothing, it should be remembered that whilst it gives full protection against liquid gas, it must be handled with reasonable care to avoid tearing the fabric. Notice how the trousers are bloused over the top of the boots in order to prevent any liquid getting down inside them. Here you see the men resting comfortably, partly dressed, until the train reaches its destination. It's not anticipated that the intensity of gas contamination will always be so high as to necessitate the wearing of full equipment by the men. In some cases, only rubber boots and eye shields need be worn, together with the applications of anti-gas ointment to exposed parts of the body. The train has now arrived at the site, and we are ready for action. The gas security officer and supervisors are preparing to leave the train to make their investigation. Here they are, dressed in full equipment. The gas security officer and other supervisors will now make detailed examination of the damage to ascertain the area affected by the liquid gas and the degree or intensity of vapor concentration. This is done by the gas security officer with an instrument known as the SD pump, which you see here being operated close to the ground near the crater. By quick calculation, he is able to say that the concentration is 6 in 1 million, and full protective clothing will be necessary. The area of the gross liquid contamination is now determined by using the poke stick, and instructions are sent back to the train to send out the decontamination squad. Here, the decontamination squad is being advised to prepare for duty in full equipment. At this stage, they will require some help, and men specially appointed to act as dressers assist in fixing the coats, gloves, respirators, hoods, and making any adjustment which may be necessary, as it is important that each man shall be thoroughly comfortable before he commences work. Notice particularly how these men are dressed. Canvas mittens are worn over the gloves to give protection to the oilskin fabric. The coat is tucked inside the trousers, and any fullness round the waist is drawn to the hips, and respirators are checked over to ensure a correct fit. Finally, the man's locker number is plainly marked on all equipment. Leaving the train, the decontamination squad goes to the tool van to collect the necessary tools. First, the bleach tray is taken out, and this will be placed on the return route from the working site. Next, pails of bleach powder and bleach paste, already mixed, together with brushes with which the paste will be applied, and also shovels and bars. It is not necessary, of course, for the man issuing stores to be dressed in equipment. Whenever possible, operations should be carried out on the windward side of the contaminated area, and to give wind direction, a smoky fire is lit and maintained throughout the operation. Danger gas notice boards are placed at appropriate points, and the decontamination squad proceeds to apply bleach powder to the contaminated sleepers and to the ballast near the crater. Bleach paste is applied to fish bolts, fish plates, and point rodding. It is very desirable to reduce as much as possible the risk of contamination from materials which must be handled, and the more the liquid gas can be neutralized, the quicker the concentration or intensity of the gas vapor will drop. At this incident, very little gas was actually in the crater, but had the crater been heavily contaminated, the obvious procedure would have been to fill it in with the soil, etc., thrown up around the rim, and so have smothered the main source of vapor. It is well to bear in mind that where it is justified, in order to achieve complete and thorough decontamination of the ground, the bleach powder should be liberally applied. Decontamination work now being well in hand, the first repair party in full protective equipment sets to work to remove the damaged rails. Fish bolts and plates are removed first. Meanwhile, the tool horses are brought from the train to the site, and positions are selected where they shall stand so that as tools are discarded, they can be placed against the tool horses and not left lying on contaminated ground. So now we have number 1 squad of the repair party at work on decontaminated ground at one end of the site, preparing to remove damaged rails, and at the other end, decontamination work is still in progress. The second repair squad, also fully equipped, arrives at the site to give assistance in the removal of the damaged rails. The bent and twisted condition of the rails appears to make their removal a difficult and arduous task, and there seems to be some trouble in getting the rail released from all the chairs. Meanwhile, the Signal and Telegraph Repair Squad releases the damaged point rods. The first rail having now been cleared, the repair squad make preparations to remove the second damaged rail from the track. One of the most arduous tasks to be carried out by the Signal and Telegraph Squad, digging a hole for the new pole. Back at the train, preparations are being made to deal with the first squad on their return for a rest period, and the dressers are applying number 2 anti-gas ointment to their hands. The first repair party, having been at work in full equipment for half an hour on a particularly hot day, leaves the site for a rest period. Their tools are placed carefully against the tool horses before leaving. On their way back to the train, every man must, without fail, wipe his boots thoroughly in the tray of bleach powder. The dressers are ready and quickly remove the hoods and respirators from each man. In spite of the particularly hot weather, the men have stood up to their task well, and the refreshing sponge of water given by the dressers over the face is thoroughly appreciated. It also helps to reduce the temptation to wipe the perspiration from one's face with a contaminated glove after the respirator has been removed. The awning erected against the side of the coach gives welcome shade during the rest period. Careful attention is given to all the respirators whilst the men are resting. Each is numbered so that its wearer can be identified. Moisture is wiped away, the eyepieces are treated with anti-dim, and the masks are hung filters uppermost on the hooks provided along the side of the coach. Work at the site is continued by the second working party. No steps have yet been taken to fill in the crater, work being concentrated on the removal of the damaged length of track. All hands are needed to release the rails and lift them to the downwind side of the site. The heavy work involved in handling these rails in full protective clothing indicates the value to be obtained by the use of a steam crane wherever possible for this sort of purpose, and to assist generally on any work where it can possibly be used. Meanwhile, the gas security officer is making tests of the vapor concentration to ascertain whether any of the protective clothing can be discarded. Local high concentrations are found, and it is decided to carry out further decontamination to these local spots. The decontamination squad is recalled to do this whilst all working parties are resting. One working party returns to the site. There is no longer any need for hoods to be worn, as there is no risk of liquid gas being blown from nearby contaminated trees or other sources. The number 2 ointment smeared over the head and neck is an alternative protection. The vapor concentration has now dropped to 4 parts per million, and the board has been altered accordingly. Repair work is now proceeding at a better rate of progress. The men are settling down to the conditions. Damaged sleepers are cleared from the immediate area, and the debris is shoveled into the crater, whilst the formation is leveled in preparation to receive the new sleepers. Supervisors in charge of the repair work should decide where the damaged contaminated material shall be stacked. If possible, this should be done on the downwind side. The down line having now been cleared, the material train is drawn up to the site, the trucks are positioned alongside the crater, and the filling material is quickly shoveled out. This will blanket and seal any liquid gas remaining in the crater, and so help to reduce the intensity of the vapor. The time allowed for one of the working parties has now expired, and the men prepare to leave the site and return to the train. Tools are placed against the tool horses, and every man passes through the bleach tray. The dressers are ready, and the gas security officer has advised that from now on it will not be necessary for oilskin protective clothing to be worn. Respirators and gloves are removed by the dressers and carefully hung outside the train. The specially designed boot jack simplifies the removal of rubber boots and so avoids unnecessary handling of the contaminated parts. The outer protective coat is unfastened and removed, and the precautions taken in removing the trousers should be carefully noted. The man is keeping his hands away from his sides and does not attempt to do any of the undressing operations himself. Meanwhile, the gas security officer is taking a further test at the site, and he finds that the vapor concentration has now dropped to 1.7 parts per million. The oilskin clothing having been discarded, these men are carrying on in impregnated suits only, and they are now unloading and placing into position a new telegraph pole. Actually, the impregnated suits are not necessary, but there was no point in these men wasting time by making a complete change. Some of these men are now returning to the train, and again we see them giving their rubber boots a thorough cleansing in the bleach tray before approaching the train. The vapor concentration has now fallen rapidly to 0.45 per million, and the next party leaves the train dressed in ordinary clothes but wearing rubber boots. They are provided with anti-gas ointment, which they will apply freely to their hands. The new rails are now unloaded from the material train, and as protective clothing is no longer necessary, the work begins to assume a more normal character. New sleepers are now being placed in position ready to receive the rails. The work is quickly nearing completion. All materials having been offloaded from the repair train, the down line can be cleared for traffic, the traffic department advised accordingly, and the train transferred to the up line. Meanwhile, the final stages of completing the reinstatement of the track are in progress. The conditions under which the work is being carried out are now little different from those of normal track relaying. A slight smell of gas lingers at the site, but the hot sun, together with the decontamination which has been done, have reduced the intensity of vapor concentration to a negligible quantity. It only remains to adjust the expansion gaps at the end of the rails, bolt up the fish plates, and complete the driving of the keys. The track is linked up. The work of the signal and telegraph repair squad is almost complete. The last bit of filling is rammed round the telegraph pole. The final truing of the track is soon done. The repair train has consolidated the repaired up line and is waiting to be coupled to the gas train. One of the last jobs before leaving the site is to decontaminate the tools. Metal parts are wiped over with a paraffin rag, wooden parts with bleach paste, and then they are loaded into an open wagon. The last repair party is now leaving the site, and although there can be little contamination remaining, precaution is still taken by every man treating his boots in the bleach tray. The boot jack is again used for removal of the rubber boots. The protective equipment worn does not entirely exclude the passage of gas vapor to the body. This vapor combines with the perspiration, and if allowed to dry on the skin, may cause some ill effect. Every man who has worked in a high concentration of gas should therefore take the earliest opportunity to wash in warm, soapy water. Where men have been working in lighter concentrations, the complete washing of the body is not necessary. The work is finished. The men complete their dressing and can take some welcome refreshment. The train, reformed, is now leaving the site, so that there should be no delay in the reopening of the line to normal traffic. And so another good job of work has been done to defeat the enemy, without fuss, undue risk, or casualty.